This will be maybe a short test video to see if this setup works for reading. Right now I am rereading Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens, and I love books, but I am clearly hard on them. And I also have two little boys who grab things and rip them if I'm not careful about placement. So I am rereading Martin Chuzzlewit, and I'm starting in the middle of a chapter at the early introduction of the character Seth Pecksniff. The brazen plate upon the door, which being Mr. Pecksniff's could not lie, bore this inscription, Pecksniff, Architect, to which Mr. Pecksniff on his cards of business added, and land surveyor. In one sense, and only one, he may be said to have been a land surveyor on a pretty large scale, as an extensive prospect lay stretched out before the windows of his house. Of his architectural doings, nothing was clearly known, except that he had never designed or built anything, but it was generally understood that his knowledge of the science was almost awful in its profundity. Mr. Pecksniff's professional engagements, indeed, were almost, if not entirely, confined to the reception of pupils, for the collection of rents, with which pursuit he occasionally varied and relieved his graver toils, could hardly be said to be a strictly architectural employment. His genius lay in ensnaring ensnaring parents and guardians and pocketing premiums. A young gentleman's premium being paid, and the young gentleman come to Mr. Pecksniff's house, Mr. Pecksniff borrowed his case of mathematical instruments, if silver-mounted or otherwise valuable, entreated him from that moment to consider himself one of the family, complimented him highly on his parents or guardians, as the case might be, and turned him loose in the spacious room on the two-pair front, where, in the company of certain drawing-boards, parallel rulers, very stiff-legged compasses, and two, or perhaps three, other young gentlemen, he improved himself for 3 or 5 years, according to his articles, in making elevations of Salisbury Cathedral from every possible point of sight, and in constructing in the air a vast quantity of castles, houses of Parliament, and other public buildings. Perhaps in no place in the world were so many gorgeous edifices of this class erected as under Mr. Pecksniff's auspices, but if but 1/20th part of the churches which were built in that front room, with one or other of the Miss Pecksniffs at the altar in the act of marrying the architect, could only be made available by the parliamentary commissioners, no more churches would be wanted for at least 5 centuries. Even the worldly goods of which we have just disposed, said Mr. Pecksniff, glancing round the table when he finished, even cream, sugar, tea, toast, ham, and eggs, suggested Charity in a low voice. And eggs, said Mr. Pecksniff, even they have their moral. See how they come and go. Every pleasure is transitory. We can't even eat long. If we indulge in harmless fluids, we get dropsy. If in exciting liquids, we get drunk. What a soothing reflection is that! Don't say we get drunk, Pa, urged the eldest Miss Pecksniff. When I say we, my dear, returned her father, I mean mankind in general, the human race, considered as a body, not as individuals. There's nothing personal in morality, my love. Even such a thing as this, said Mr. Pecksniff, laying the forefinger of his left hand upon the brown paper patch on the top of his head. Slight casualty, baldness, though it may be, reminds us that we are but— He was going to say worms, but recollecting that worms were not remarkable for heads of hair, he substituted flesh and blood. Which, cried Mr. Pecksniff, after a pause, during which he seemed to have been casting about for a new moral, and not quite successfully, which is also very soothing. Mercy, my dear, stir the fire and throw up the cinders. The young lady obeyed, and having done so, resumed her stool, reposed one arm upon her father's knee, and laid her blooming cheek upon it. Miss Charity drew her chair nearer the fire, as one prepared for conversation, and looked towards her father. "Yes," said Mr. Pecksniff, after a short pause, during which he had been silently smiling, and shaking his head at the fire. "I have again been fortunate in the attainment of my object. A new inmate will very shortly come among us." "A youth, papa?" asked Charity. "Yes, a youth," said Mr. Pecksniff. "He will avail himself of the eligible opportunity which now offers for uniting the advantages of the best practical architectural education with the comforts of a home and the constant association with some who, however humble their sphere, limited their capacity, are not unmindful of their moral responsibilities." "Oh, Pa!" cried Mercy, holding up her finger archly. "See advertisement." Playful warbler," said Mr. Pecksniff. It may be observed in connection with calling his daughter a warbler that she was not at all vocal, but that Mr. Pecksniff was in the frequent habit of using any word that occurred to him as having a good sound, and rounding a sentence well, without much care for its meaning. And he did this so boldly and in such an imposing manner that he would sometimes stagger the wisest people with his eloquence, and make them gasp again. His enemies asserted, by the way, that a strong trustfulness in sounds and forms was the master key to Mr. Pecksniff's character. "Is he handsome, Pa?" inquired the younger daughter. "Silly Mary," the other daughter. "Silly Mary," said the eldest, Mary being fond for Mercy. "What is the premium, Pa? Tell us that." "Oh, good gracious, Cherry!" cried Miss Mercy, holding up her hands with the most winning giggle in the world. "What a mercenary girl you are! Oh, you naughty, thoughtful, prudent thing!" It was perfectly charming and worthy of the pastoral age to see how the two Miss Pecksniffs slapped each other after this, and then subsided into an embrace expressive of their different dispositions. "He is well-looking," said Mr. Pecksniff slowly and distinctly. "Well-looking enough. I do not positively expect any immediate premium with him." Notwithstanding their different natures, both Charity and Mercy concurred in opening their eyes uncommonly wide at this announcement, and looking for the moment as blank as if their thoughts had actually a direct bearing on the main chance. "But what of that?" said Mr. Pecksniff, all still smiling at the fire. "There is disinterestedness in the world, I hope. We are not all arrayed in two opposite ranks, the offensive and the defensive. Some few there are who walk between, who help the needy as they go, and take no part with either side. There was something in these morsels of philanthropy which reassured the sisters. They exchanged glances, and brightened very much. "Oh, let us not be forever calculating, devising, and plotting for the future," said Mr. Pecksniff, smiling more and more, and looking at the fire as a man might who was cracking a joke with it. "I am weary of such arts. If our inclinations are but good and open-hearted, let us gratify them boldly, that they bring upon us loss instead of profit. Charity?" Glancing toward his daughters for the first time since he had begun these reflections, and seeing that they both smiled, Mr. Pecksniff eyed them for an instant so jocosely, though still with a kind of stately waggishness, that the younger one was moved to sit upon his knee forthwith, put her fair arms around his neck, and kissed him 20 times. During the whole of this affectionate display she laughed to a most immoderate extent, in which hilarious indulgence even the prudent Cherry joined. "Tut, tut," said Mr. Pecksniff, pushing his latest born away, and running his fingers through his hair as he resumed his tranquil face. What folly is this? Let us take heed how we laugh without reason, lest we cry with it. What is the domestic news since yesterday? John Westlock is gone, I hope? Indeed, no, said Charity. And why not? Returned his father. His term expired yesterday, and his box was packed, I know, for I saw it in the morning, standing in the hall. He slept last night at the Dragon, returned the young lady, and had Mr. Pinch to dine with him. They spent the evening together, and Mr. Pinch was not home till very late. And when I saw him on the stairs this morning, Pa, said Mercy with her usual sprightliness, he looked, oh goodness, such a monster, with his face all manner of colours, and his eyes as dull as if they had been boiled, and his head aching dreadfully, I am sure, from the look of it, and his clothes smelling, oh, it's impossible to say how strong of, here the lady shuddered, of smoke and punch. Now, I think, said Mr. Pecksniff, with his accustomed gentleness, though still with the air of one who suffered under injury without complaint, I think Mr. Pinch might have done better than choose for his companion one who, at the close of a long intercourse, had endeavoured, as he knew, to wound my feelings. I am not quite sure that this was delicate in Mr. Pinch. I am not quite sure that this was kind in Mr. Pinch. I will go further and say I am not quite sure that this was even ordinarily grateful in Mr. Pinch. But what can anyone expect from Mr. Pinch? Cried Charity, with a strong and scornful emphasis on the name, as if it would have given her unspeakable pleasure to express it in an acted charade on the calf of that gentleman's leg. So, if you're still awake, one of the things I might need comment on or feedback on is whether I'm reading too excitedly for ASMR. Sorry to break in. I really like reading aloud, and normally my intent is to make it very dramatic, but I don't think that's quite appropriate when you're trying to lull someone to sleep. I'd also like to know, if you're awake and willing to comment, whether it helps that I'm making extra sounds, like playing with the pages, or if it's more distracting to have the sound on top of the reading. So, I think, yeah, I might stop here for now. I just wanted to test it out. And I would love to do a series of readings, but I need a little bit of a sense of how to do them in the way that's the most relaxing. I might need to practice the voices, or I might need to drop the voices. So, yeah, any comments you have on what was pleasant and relaxing and what was distracting would be wonderful. Thank you.